All right, good evening. It's Tuesday, August 18th, 5 p.m. This is the Parks and Public Works Committee meeting. Where I'm going to call this meeting to order and take the roll. We have with us Councilmember Holloway, myself, Kat Cotton as chair. The mayor is here, as is the city administrator, interim director of Public Works. Mr. Bennett is here, and of course, Andrew is here for IT services. So, Councilmember Dan Murphy is delayed in travel. Is there a motion to excuse him from the meeting?
So moved.
And I'll second that. And so he is excused from this meeting today, although he's missing a good one. We've got presentations tonight. Um, uh, we have our agenda from the August 4th Parks and Public Works Committee meeting in the packet. Any concerns?
Good with the agenda as presented and with the minutes attached.
Okay. The only thing I did see was a Scribner's error in that minutes regarding the under committee members. It had Councilmember Holloway as being virtual for the meeting when it was actually Councilmember Murphy. So I accept the minutes as they are presented as well. Next up is public comments, and it doesn't appear. Yes, Mayor.
Subject to us making that change, is that correct?
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah, it was just a Scribner's error.
Got it. We will correct it. Thanks.
And we have public comment next, but there is no public in the chambers this evening. So we will close public comment at this time. And as we were stating, the minutes are approved for the last meeting. There are no agenda bills tonight. So we'll go right into discussion with Director Bennett has a presentation of the 2027 Landscape Services Contract Scope and Schedule Considerations.
Thank you, committee members. Philip Bennett, Interim Director, Parks and Public Works. We are presenting tonight on our upcoming rebid of our landscape services contract, and I have this presentation. So wanted to start with some examples of areas that are maintained not by our staff, but by a landscape contractor and have been for some years in the city. So along Snoqualmie Parkway, extensive landscapes are managed under this contract, including the bioswales on the side and the median. That is one of the three contracts that we have, which is Snoqualmie Parkway and other right-of-ways. On the right, you'll see Ironwood Park with its famous slopes, and that is also maintained under a landscape contract for mini parks. And the bottom there, we've got landscape beds along 202 Railroad Avenue. That is also under the right-of-ways contract, but there is a third contract, which is for facilities such as police station, fire station, and city hall. So the current status of the contract is we have to rebid it because it expires at the end of this year. It was a 5-year contract starting in 2022 with a 3-year initial term and then 2 optional extension years, which the council opted to extend that existing contract for. There's no more room to do that, to extend the existing contract, so we will need to rebid. I want to let you know that some areas are being added to this contract. The mapping is changed. We made some discoveries, and the discoveries were that the ROA and us had the same landscape contractor for several years, and that contractor was doing some additional work that neither the ROA nor the city were paying them for. And since the ROA now has a different landscape contractor, and we've discovered those areas and we've received some complaints about those. And so we're adding them to this. Our proposed contract term is a 2-year initial term with an option to extend individually for 2 following years. Give you a sense of the scope and costs. It's a lot of turf and bioswales and landscape beds, so 37.5 acres. And then our 2026 costs, you can see there with our 2027 anticipated costs next to those. We have some problems with some of our landscapes, which you'll notice when you drive down Snoqualmie Parkway, particularly the median. So what you're seeing there is the grass has gradually risen over the years. Don't want to go into all the technical details, but this happens over time with grass. There's something called thatch, and it rises up. And when that happens, it buries the irrigation. And so what we're looking at is areas where the irrigation can't irrigate right now without some renovations. That does lead to some excessive water usage too. We don't have the broadcast range of the irrigation. And so you'll see sometimes in the morning driving up and down the parkway, you'll see water on the road. That's because we have to put a lot of water on that grass to keep it green. And as you can see, we're not 100% successful. Wanted to show you some examples of different landscape concepts that we have already, and one that we're going to propose as an option into the future for you to consider. You'll see on the left that there's a mix of shrubs and ground covers, and that is probably about 1/3 of the parkway has that type of landscaping. You'll see on the right, there's just a single line of trees in a mulch bed. So that's present in 4 areas on the parkway. And then you know about the turf that I had on the other slide. And then the image, the aerial image that you see there is a proposed concept of changing some existing landscape. This is something we could do. We could eliminate some turf, and we could replace it with a mix of other landscape types. And that has some advantages that I'll share with you on the next slide. So these options, one of which is just status quo, what we have now, would affect how we would bid the contract moving forward. So I guess the status quo doesn't really affect the way we would bid it, but the other 2 may have some impacts. We could stay as is. We could continue to work with what we have, and what you would see on Snoqualmie Parkway wouldn't change very much. Pro for that, there wouldn't be any additional expenditure on capital. The cons are the appearance that you see would be the appearance we continue with. And there'll be an ongoing high maintenance cost. I want to tell you what I mean by that. Snoqualmie Parkway has to be shut down. The 2 lanes of Snoqualmie Parkway have to be closed off once a week during the summertime so that the landscape crews can go in and mow the turf. The cost of that traffic control, laying out all those cones and that work zone and mowing is high. And that's a cost that is not equal among the other landscape types on the parkway. They don't require as much maintenance frequency. One more con for maintaining the median as it is now, we would continue to use a lot of water to keep that grass somewhat alive. Going to a second option, we would essentially rip out the existing turf areas and start over. These are 27 years old, by the way. I looked at the aerial images. So that turf was installed 27 years ago. And so we would pull it out. We would put some new soil down. We would do any irrigation repairs needed, restore the irrigation function, drop the level of the turf back down to where it should be. And there would be some pros to that. We would have good irrigation coverage. The grass would stay green. We would have some water savings. We wouldn't need to use as much water to irrigate those areas, and it would improve the appearance from what it is today. Cons, we'd have to spend money from capital to do that. It would be this is not an engineer's estimate. This is I guess an estimate before we get to that point, but it would be about $450K. And it may increase the ongoing maintenance cost simply because if we're to avoid this happening again, we would have to do some aerating. We'd have to have the landscape contractor do some aerating in an attempt to prevent the thatch from building up over time, or have them pick up all their grass clippings, neither of which are included in the existing contract nor ever has been. The third option is the bigger change, the one that I described on the previous slide. So it would be to install a different type of landscaping in the grassy areas. So remove the grass and put in a mixture of different landscape types, shrubs, trees, and ground covers. Ground covers would be very low, and those would be used wherever there's an intersection to preserve sight lines. So in other words, those areas would not be any higher really than the grass is now. Some pros. If we were to do this, we would reduce the ongoing maintenance costs. We'd no longer need to close off parkway lanes every week during the summer. We would no longer need to mow with a frequency of once a week. We would save a lot of water simply because grass requires the most irrigation water to keep going. And I'll say too, it would be a change in appearance. You'll notice the change of appearances on the pros and cons because it does depend on the eye of the beholder. Some people may find this more attractive than the grass that is there right now, and some people may find it less so. The cons are, again, cost of a capital project. It would be similar in amount to option 2. And as I said, change in appearance. Some people may not appreciate that. So we're just looking to start this conversation and hear your thoughts on this.
Director. So I do have a few questions, and I'm sure Councilmember Holloway will be chiming in here too. So is the thatch basically the root system of the grass growing up over 27 years and giving it that height? Is that the basic layman's terms, I guess, for that?
Yes. I'll add to that it's also an accumulation of material over time, which is the grass clippings itself. And that causes it to rise. Yeah.
Okay, the
So
organic.
what you're saying and what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
Both.
And I have noticed in some places where the landscaping folks have around the sprinkler heads, just basically weed whacked and tried to, create an opening around it. But you're right, it still kind of rises back up to that. So I realize that that is just around the immediate area. Is there in my irrigation landscaping, there's been some areas where we've had to actually put risers on the sprinkler heads to get it above. Is that something that could be done in some areas as a temporary solution?
It could. I did speak with our operations team about this, and it would be actually a few weeks of work for them to do that in those turf areas because it would require digging
Mhm,
each individual head
mhm.
and doing that work. So it would be a significant burden
So
on
there's a
staff.
significant amount of the sprinkler heads that are affected by the thatch height.
Most all.
Okay. And what about in the current um, already low shrub areas on the median? Because some of those have grown up over 27 years as well. What is the current kind of maintenance of those areas, and how is the watering systems doing in those areas as well?
Those areas receive less frequent maintenance a few times a year, and that's mainly trimming the shrubs and making sure that there are sight lines and there's a good appearance. The irrigation system in those areas, some is covered. The root systems of shrubs and trees are different, and they don't require as much water, as frequent water. So there's some issues with the irrigation systems there, but they're not really impacting the landscape in the same way that you visibly see with the grass areas.
And with the options 2 or 3, is that something the installation or ripping out and installing new either grass or um, shrubbery and or ground cover, is that something that would go out to bid to a contractor, or would our city crews do that?
I felt a cold shiver when you said, would our city crews do that?
I know.
It's beyond us,
Okay.
council member.
Okay, that's what I
It's
basically.
beyond it's beyond our staffing levels and what we have to manage.
Okay, that was my question. And just for the minute, so I'll let Councilmember Holloway chime in. Do we, are you talking about like on the bioswales, on the sidewalk areas, replacing that grass as well? Or just in the medians?
Just in the median.
Okay,
You've noticed probably the mottled appearance and the bioswales too.
mhm,
And different type of landscape, different function for us.
yeah,
We're not looking at replacing those, not
Right.
proposing that.
okay, okay. All right, I'll come up for air, go ahead.
So the suggestion she had of like replacing sprinkler heads is, and things, is that number 2? Or is number 2 rip out and put a new irrigation system?
In both instances, there'll be modifications to the irrigation system. In number 2, reinstalling with grass, we would try and preserve, as part of the capital project, we would try and preserve the existing irrigation system, make any repairs that are necessary to the laterals. In number 3, it would require reconfiguring the irrigation system because shrubs and trees just have different needs. And so we wouldn't go with the irrigation system as it currently is installed for option 3.
Okay,
So
but
to give you an
I-
example,
I heard a 4th option. I haven't heard a
Okay.
dollar figure attached of fix the existing irrigation system. I understand this. It was an unpleasant thought for you, but my real question is, what is the dollar figure attached to it?
sure.
Okay, back up ahead, and this is probably a homework assignment versus question here. I would like to know those new pieces of area that are being added in due to the I'm going to say it's incorrect, due to the contract overlap between us and the ROA. So I just would like to know what those new areas are. I'm a bit confused in general because we just spent $3 million, put a brand new reservoir and irrigation systems, and I'm not chasing reduction in unless I'm misunderstanding, I'm not chasing reduction in irrigation water because it's reclaimed water. We either put it back in the river, we put it back in Eagle Lake, or we put it in irrigation, but it all goes spread somewhere, but it's just reclaimed water. It's not, yeah, there's a charge, we do a charge to it, but it's a byproduct of just the city breathing and living. I won't go into details of, so I, so I'm confused by justification of this would be less irrigation water. It doesn't drive me. Okay. That I don't think us saving on irrigation water would reducing irrigation water would result in savings somewhere else. We're still going to produce that reclaimed water based on the usage or the volume of wastewater we get. So that operation is still going to go on. So we got to use it some way. So I don't view that as a dollars in the bank savings. And so either one of these is $500,000. Is there a proposal where that $500,000 comes from, or is that just an increase, ask for increase in budget?
Right now, we haven't developed the proposal of where that would come from, but it would be a capital cost.
Are those, I mean, are there any projects that total that amount that there is potential can be pushed off for 2 years? Yes, Mayor.
Yeah, so it's a great question. We've been talking about that too. I think if you think about the capital, so remember, this is in the utilities capital. So the how do I want to say that? So the utilities capital looks out over a number of years, and then we go through this every couple of years. We relook at that. We go through the rate setting. Of course, the projects that are in that outlook change. The timing of them changes. For example, the most recent one, the projects that we thought would happen last year didn't all happen last year. So there's sort of always kind of a movement in there. So what I kind of focused on as I kind of pressed into the very question that was just asked is kind of how does it look overall? Is that going to overall be an increase or overall flat? And the answer is, well, there's sort of things in and out. There's no quick answer, but it's not, I guess that in a way to me felt like an answer because it's not a situation of, no, we put that in and now the total just goes up. There's moving parts. And probably next year's when we'll next go through the rate setting process. And the idea is it'll sort of be in there, but it doesn't look like it necessarily, it certainly doesn't look like that's necessarily a $500,000 increase, but there's moving parts in there and timing. So since that work hasn't been done yet, there really isn't a good answer. I thought, I mean, it's the same question I had, but the answer was not, in essence, not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily need an offset in order to not impact rates. We'll sort of have to see how all the pieces are moving around. It's not a piece that overwhelms all the other pieces, I guess is what I took from that. Sorry if I could go on.
Yeah.
We could go say, oh, look, we didn't do that project that was $500,000, therefore, boom, we've got the offset. I'm uncomfortable with that answer because then my question becomes, well, wait a minute, did that project just move? Or is that a project that's timing is changing? And so that's where it starts to be all the moving parts and it sort of looks like a soup answer until we go through the process. Okay, point in time, now tell us how does it look now, which is something we probably wouldn't do until, we normally won't do until next year.
And here's another question that the mayor may be able to add some thoughts to. So since the ROA and the city, are taking care of, like you said, some overlapping of things, is there any thoughts given to how, things might change as far as we've had quite a few residents, especially with the budget issue coming up, mention that they are surprised that the city maintains some of the mini parks and things within the neighborhoods, that they're used to that actually being the homeowners association that does those types of things. And so I was wondering if there's any consideration for any kind of negotiation with the ROA as far as potentially taking back some of, or taking maintenance over on some of those things, or, you know, what encumbrances that might bring upon us or not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, great question. We haven't had that explicit conversation, but generally, there, as as Director Bennett alluded to, there's actually a lot of, what about this area? What about that area that we're still working through? So that we're having conversations with on an ongoing basis with the ROA, where we go in and say, wait a minute, we thought you were doing this. And they said, no, nope, not doing that. And here's why. So I will just say they, their point of view generally, now we haven't put this particular question to them. So I'm hesitant to sort of speak for them, but I would say their general reaction is there are things that we, the ROA, are responsible for. And we're committed to doing that. And the fact that somebody was doing more of those, whether that somebody who was doing them thought they were doing them for us or they thought they were doing them from the city, is, my words, sort of a them problem. The ROA's point of view is, look, this is what we collect from our members and this is what we paid for and this is what we've always intended to pay for. And we don't have room in our budget to take on things that we never agreed to take on in the past. And they are pretty resistant to that. They have their own budget pressures, of course, just like we do. And so we could certainly have those conversations. And if you'd like us to do that, we absolutely can. But that they certainly don't, that they're pretty firm on other areas about, hey, these are the areas that we're willing to pay for and we're not willing to take on more because we just don't have funding to do that.
Are the parks that the city's maintaining actually owned by the city, or are they owned by the Ridge Group?
All of these areas in the landscape contract are owned by the city.
Okay. All right, I see the wheels turning.
Well, again, part of it is I want to see the areas that are in discussion. I find it hard to believe that I have a contractor over a number of years was maintaining a piece of property under no contract whatsoever. Okay? They believed there was a contract that told them to do this. Matter of fact, I mean, this is not the first landscaper we've had in here. Okay, we've had other ones, and these properties have been taken care of. So whether they admit it or not, there is in cases where they were paying in the past, the fact that they paid in the past says they have demonstrated responsibility to that piece of property. Okay, so I don't, there's room for negotiation versus just no. Okay, so let's have that discussion, but it's a zero sum game to try to push this on the ROA because they have zero people on staff that do this. This will go against whatever landscaping contract they have. So whatever they pick up, they're going to pay for. Okay. I just want to make sure that the delineation between city and ROA is correct. Okay. And again, I'm confused that there was multiple contractors
Usually,
maintaining property that was in neither one of the contracts. Or that the contracts were so poorly written, nobody could really tell what property was supposed to be maintained.
I would have thought it would go the other way, that it would be, pieces of property would be missed, but, so, yes, Mayor.
Yeah, absolutely. I share all those points of view and have said basically the same thing. So,
Logic doesn't just.
but I think one thing that sort of has settled into my mind is, and to be clear, yes, we'll get you a list of those areas. The thing that sort of settled in my mind is, okay, we're going to go out to bid. So the fact is, we're going to say, here's what we need taken care of, so give us your best price. So we do kind of, it's not a situation where it's the ongoing contractor and we're sort of arm wrestling with them. This is just open season. We're saying, here's what we want taken care of. Now give us your best bid and we'll pick the lowest responsive bidder. So that gives me some comfort that, a better, if there's some problem with our description, we'll get the best pricing by getting the description right, but we can absolutely get you that information because obviously they're dealing with it.
So when would the bids be going out? Or approximately?
Last quarter this year.
Okay.
If I
Yes.
If I
ma'am.
could, the goal here was to get to you fairly early, because with these capital ideas, the thought was, that might be something that you might want to think about in a bit. So we didn't want to bring you this at the last minute. Um, and so this lets you kind of think about which way you want to go, and then they can kind of put together the plan based on kind of the directional guidance. So this is sort of an early, give us guidance kind of request. What do you like? Which way do you kind of feel like? And then we'll sort of push down that direction.
I think,
And is the intention to have either 2 or 3 as options on the bid, on the contract?
It isn't, we haven't talked about that. The idea was to pick the thing. Remember, the option 2 and 3 are both dependent upon us then doing capital work first.
Right.
So they're quite different contracts. So probably we'd figure out which thing we want to do and then bid that thing.
As a separate action
Yes.
from the general landscape. Okay. So you don't need that answer to do the landscaping contract at the end of this year.
Sorry, I didn't say it well. So if we think about option 1, if we can kind of think about it, it has a certain amount of turf and a certain amount of not turf. If we went with option 2, that would be similar.
turf, yeah.
Yeah, right, because we would have done a capital project to sort of, if you will, fix the turf, but it would still be the same amount of turf. So that would probably look similar to option number 1. Option number 3 is what would be much different, because instead of X amount of turf, we'd have a lesser than X amount of turf. So there'd be less for them to take care of. So that would be, they would likely bid that much lower. So probably the key is, are we going to stick with the turf and either we're fixing it or doing something in the irrigation, but basically we're sticking with the same amount of turf? Or do we want to go to something like 3 where we actually pull out a significant portion of the turf? That would probably be something we'd bid, that would be bid differently than the others.
I think I would like maybe a ballpark figure as far as with option 1, what would, if we wanted to, like I said, do the risers or some modification on the irrigation, what does something like that tack on to costs for that? I mean, as far as the personnel costs and, equipment, or if we kind of just concentrated in certain real problem areas, where then we can, potentially address the other options a bit down the road. Mayor?
Yeah, great. I think what we'll do is, so the fixing, let's call it the fixing the irrigation system notion, we'll bring you a cost for that. It'll be a rough estimate, but get you into, okay, does that look attractive or not to pursue?
Yeah.
So we'll get you, that would be a capital cost. So that would be separate. So just as you had 3 options here, this would be in essence a 4th option. It would be like the first 2, because the mowing contract would probably be the same. But then, okay, but how much capital cost would that mean to kind of fix that? It's basically then you're fixing the appearance and the problems with water usage. So we might, so let us cost that as a separate item and bring that back to you.
Did you have any other things that,
Well, other than, I mean,
knowing this?
the water
areas
usage is a balloon thing. You may save it over here, but it's gonna pop out over here. It's just savings against ourselves. So it'll be a zero-sum game. If you save on irrigation costs in this area, you still have the same wastewater treatment cost you had before, and you're not gonna offset some of it. So you'll increase your wastewater. So there's no savings there for us. Burn marks 2 to 3 months a year. It doesn't emotionally move me. Okay, I mean, I grew up in North Dakota. The state goes yellow. Okay, during the summer. Okay, period. So maybe I'm a little old fashioned, but I don't. I'm having a hard time suggesting spending $500,000 for burn marks for summertime burn marks.
If I could, that totally makes sense. So, we'll, I want to look into, I don't know the answer. If we used less reclaimed water on the parkway, would that in fact somehow change our total costs or not? Let us look into that. I think you're probably right in your analysis, but there's some reasons why that might not be right. So let us look into that. We'll report that back to you as well. By the way, since you brought it up, it's unrelated to this, but I'll just put it into your thinking. Separate from this entirely, it's just a water usage question. We could stop watering the bioswales. So this is the side now, not the center. If we did that, we would have, well, it goes back to the same question you just asked, council member, which is, would that save us money, or would we still be paying the same amount? We just wouldn't be using the water. So let us look into that, because if we weren't using that water, and if that did in fact produce a savings, now you get a very different experience. Residents in Western Washington are used to green things, unlike where you grew up, where they are used to it not being green. So there is a question of, would the residents find that acceptable or objectionable? But we've got some time to sort of kind of try to poke around and find that out, or at least think it through. But there is, we think, a chance, we're checking into it, that if we stop watering the bioswales, let them just go dormant, so they kind of turn that straw color. Some people in Western Washington who aren't used to this think that the grass dies. The grass doesn't die, as you know, it just goes dormant. But we could do that, and that would save a lot of water usage. So that's sort of a separate matter. It wasn't part of this today, but it is something that's sort of related to think about as well. So that's something we'll bring up again in the future. But just thought I'd let that kick around in your minds. But we will get you those things, as well as anything else you asked for, but we will get you those things you asked for to help you kind of further analyze this proposal.
Because the rest of the year, the bioswales are just actually, they've got sitting water in them.
Yeah, they do.
So the grass comes back green, and I mean, that's its own irrigation source just based on its use. So
That's right. Its whole purpose.
yeah. So
Yes, but you're kind of getting into boiling the frog slowly or boiling the frog fast. You will get a reaction if those bioswales just go yellow. If you have occasional splotches of yellow and it's 90 degrees out, people kind of look at it and go, yeah, it's hot. So just be aware they're difference in kind.
but also the community knows that we're in the middle of a budget crunch, and so that we are looking for ways to be cutting back on our spending, or it's potentially do savings. So I think,
Who are we buying the irrigation water from?
but I think they might be more tolerant of those kinds of things.
Savings
just a
are
thought.
marginal.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what the savings are, but yes.
Yeah,
ma'am.
yeah. Well, so we'll see what the savings are, if any. So that's interesting. One other thing to think about now, it's not a budget concept, but there are people that are focused not so much on the budget, but focused on the environment. And the thought goes, well, okay, you may not save any money, but if you're not putting the water onto the parkway, you could dump it into the river, which would help with river health. So there is sort of another aspect to this, which is the environmental impact. It's not a budgetary impact, we think, but let us come back to you for sure on that. But there is another thing at play here.
Are these things something that potentially would come back at the next meeting, or within a few meetings?
Within a few meetings,
Before the
let us kind of pull that together.
Mhm.
It's not urgent. We don't need you to make a decision. We're trying to give you plenty of lead time. So we'll go get that data and come back to you with plenty of time for you to then make some decisions and give us guidance.
Any additional questions, concerns? No, okay. All right, well, thank you for the presentation, Director Bennett. And I think what we have next up is items for future discussion. I did have a question, Mayor, for you, as far as, did you get all the information you needed from our previous discussions about the contract component discussions, that you know, the information that was brought up during discussions, was that enough, or is that something we need to address again?
It will be something we need to address again, but the information we got from you has been very helpful. We've had a whole bunch of in-depth meetings, staff trying to figure out, okay, based on that discussion, what are the sort of focus points of the council? What are the things that maybe we haven't told council and it's time for us to tell them? How can we lay this out to help them be fully informed? So we're doing all that work. There's a team, both finance folks and Parks and Public Works working on that. So I'm hoping that at your next meeting, we'll be able to come back with a full discussion of all those elements and how are they interacting and what are, what would we be trying to achieve with a proposal of doing something different, and then kind of walk you through that and let you decide how you want to have that go. So very helpful. We're working on it. Hope to be back to you at your next meeting.
I do think certainly, I'm hoping, as you know, we kind of head into what hopefully we'll be having regular budget meetings with council and departments and such. So if that's something that we're planning to, you know, potentially put onto our committee agendas as far as, you know, talking about those types of things and what's, you know, coming up with those concerns and such, especially from the city staff and departments. I'd certainly like to be included in that information and do that regularly, not only with committees, but of course with council, a full council as well. The other thing I'd like to see, and maybe we can even just periodically get a very brief 1 or 2 sentence update on our current projects. I mean, I see they're moving the big rocks down at Sandy Cove, and looks like Goodfellows is really well organized on this project. It looks much better than the other project when they were working on that. But River Trail's almost looking done. Our plans for like a ribbon cutting, anything like that going on, or the reservoir, again, almost, you know, considered complete. And is there going to be like a ribbon cutting on that, or just kind of fly that one under the radar?
I don't know if we're trying to play anything on the radar. We are planning a ribbon cutting for the river trail. We're just, in fact, I think we just pinned down the date. We think we wanted to make sure that we invited those folks who were instrumental in getting us the funding for that. And so we kind of got to the bottom of that and know who we're going to invite. We've got a target date. It now depends on making sure that those individuals can be there. So we should know within the next couple of days, should be ready to announce a ribbon cutting on River Trail. I think I've told staff that the way I'll know that we're done with River Trail.
They'll move the honey bucket.
That's exactly what I said.
That's, yeah, that's good. That
Very
was,
conversational here today.
and maybe they'll weed back the weeds that are right along the road, so it's all nice and pristine looking. I see the sprinklers are in, so that's all.
Yeah. By the way, those sprinklers, I think, are not, you know, a lot of the sprinkling you see going on. I think you're all aware that there was a problem with the plants that were provided and then they died. And so now we're having to put them in. Actually, the contract had to go find new plants, which turned out to be a lot harder than one might have thought. They did get those eventually, but now they're being planted in the wrong season, which means we have to irrigate the heck out of them to get them to actually, you know, do whatever plants do, take into the, so that's why you see some of that irrigation happening that you wouldn't normally see.
Temporary thing.
It's a temporary thing just this year.
When we're hooked up to a fire hydrant to irrigate, I figured that that's going to be the
Probably
long-term
not
fix.
for a minute, yeah.
But being that we're next to the river, there should be enough, hopefully, groundwater saturation too.
Well, it counts against our water usage, so
Yeah.
it is, yeah. But you know, I am not aware of any discussion on a ribbon cutting for the reservoir, is that the right thing to call it? But that's something we'll take up, so thank you for that. We'll come back to you with that idea, and then what else did you say? Yeah, there's a whole budget calendar that we're planning to come forward to the council with, and sort of lay out kind of the timing of when and how we'll interact and get council's input on what you would like to see happen.
Sounds great. Thank you. Councilmember Holloway, any items for future discussion for you?
Not this time.
Well, would certainly consider entertaining a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
All right, we'll consider ourselves adjourned here at 5:46. Thank you.